Liberia staff, Mr. Dennis Ja and Sony Sie. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Gentlemen, we want to say welcome to Focus on Liberia. As Daniel said, our topic today is on the progressives. So we have the progressive, the history, activities, and some reflections. This is a commentary, and we are glad to have Mr. Manju Freeman, a progressive himself, joining us to talk about the history, activities, and reflections on the progressive. Our FOL analyst, Mr. Wilmot Kunney, who himself is a progressive, is here today to discuss. We want to welcome all our viewers across the globe. Soon to Focus on Liberia as I join Mr. Sear to take it away from me. Mr. Sear.
Mr. Jai, thank you. Thank you, Danielle. I also want to join you all by saying happy Mother's Day to all those listening to us, to our mothers out there. Mothers play a very unique role in all of our lives, and it is their day, and we want to recognize them for doing that. But today is about the progressive. I am happy to be here. The progressive community is being talked about a lot, but there are some things sometimes we don't get to. And Woman Kunney is here to help me get to some of those things. I hope he came prepared because I'm here to push him until he gives me something. Mr. Freeman is also here. He is a progressive. And we want to talk about everything starting from history, starting about their involvement, talking about the two panelists here, their involvement with the progressive, some activities about the progressive. Maybe we'll look at failures and successes, whether they have some regrets as well. We will be looking at that. So folks, if you are joining us, this is the network you come for education, elevation, and promotion of all things Liberia, and that's what we do. And that's why we are the #1 in terms of informing our people. Hey, I'm not here to blow the horn. Maybe Kunney is here to do so, or maybe Mr. Freeman is here. Let's get started, gentlemen. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. Who should we start with? Maybe we should start with Kunney. Let him show Mr. Freeman the way because he's been here and seems to be a little comfortable with this platform. So, Mr. Kunney, the history of the progressive is something that is spicy. Some people see it differently. And those who have the opportunity to be with those newsmakers, you are here today and we want to get a unique piece of the progressive history. So in terms of history, let me turn it over to Mr. Dennis Jad.
Yeah, before we even go to the history, there is still not a common understanding of who are the progressives in Liberia. So sometimes some people say so-called progressive and all kinds of names. So let's start with that very basic. Who are the progressives in Liberia?
Mr. Kunney?
Okay. Again, I want to thank you, Mr. C.A. and Mr. Dennis. This topic is a very huge topic and is a very important topic. So before we set the discussion into motion, I think certain caveats need to be created. Okay. The progressive community is a very huge community. And I'm not here to pretend to fill that big shoes that many great Liberians, very good Liberians of some of the funniest Liberians I've ever seen in my entire life, that role that they play. I'm not here to pretend that I will fill that shoe or I will be a spokesperson for all of them. Two things I can do here. I can give my own modest affiliation with the progressive movement and also make my contribution as an analyst on FOL. I think my brother here, the senior brother that is here, may have, in fact, a deeper understanding of the issues than me. I wanted to be clear out there that there are people far more senior with superior knowledge of the progressive movement, the activities of the movement. But if you ask me the history of my own involvement, that I can easily do. I became a member of the progressive movement, specifically the Movement for Justice in Africa, MOJA, in 1978.
Mr. Kunney, let me hold you right there. We'll get there. We just want to know whom they call progressive in Liberia. So,
well, in my view, my understanding, the progressive are those who fight for change for a better Liberia.
Thank you.
That's just a simple. Anybody that fight to change conditions in our country in a way that will make Liberia better, that will create a fairer society, a more prosperous society. I think that person is a progressive, and those were the ideals that attracted me at such a young age, at 17 years old, to join the movement. Because what I heard were a group of Liberians coming together to advocate for a better Liberia, a better society where the rights of all Liberians will be respected, where we would deal with one another in a more fairer and equitable basis, and where we have a just society. It was that core that attracted me to the progressive movement. So I think anyone that espouse to those values of justice, equality, those values of peace, those values of social justice, economic development, I think that person is a progressive.
Thank you. Let's go to Mr. Freeman, our guest.
Well, as Kunney stated, when you talk about progressive, there were many different facets of progressives. But we can go back to the 1800s and look at E.J. Roy. E.J. Roy was a progressive of the time because he was the first black president that they had. Looking at what J.J. Roberts and James Freeman and other people had done, he tried to act differently. Some people document that as the first coup in Liberian history. You look at my own name, Freeman. We know we are fumblers, but we could not go to school when the people came in there earlier. So we had to change our names to names that reflected what they thought to go to school. And my own family chose the name Freeman, from Fumble. And so though they are the same families, there was some aspect taking in participation to what was had been happening in Liberia. They would come to someone like Detroit, who took Liberia to the League of Nations court because we were supposedly involved in slavery. And Detroit was exiled until he was a very old man. And when he was brought back home, he died. Then coming on to H. Boyman Fambule Sr., who had certain problems with the administration of Tubman because he had certain progressive ideologies that he tried to bring forth. And that brought him into a famous trial that was carried by all of the world stations. And University of Liberian students walked away from University of Liberia to the Temple of Justice every day to listen to this man. And then Dr. Tipote came a little later on with his own movement that started to catch on in Liberia and manifested itself through the movement for justice in Africa. And then you had another type of progressivism that came with the Progressive Alliance of Liberia through Bacchus Matthews and his group. And so, progressivism has progressed differently, and there are several facets, some of which were at loggerhead with each other. And we have had to morph over the years to adjust to the situations that were placed upon us. And so when you talk about progressives, you talk about a wide range of people who have gone through various phases of the Liberian history.
All right, thank you there, Mr. Freeman. So what I'm getting from the two of you is that, to put it very simply for somebody like me who came way after you to understand is that people like Amos Sawyer and those who have believed in him and follow him, people like H. Wellman Formula, those who have believed in him and follow him, and then Tipote, and then Bacchus Matthew, and many others who I can't remember right now. Those people and their followers and the ideology about freedom and justice that they held at the time, those group of people are the one we call progressive. Is that what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, they are. Those are important members of the progressive movement. It's a movement, and it's not a static movement. It is a dynamic movement. The dynamism in the progressive alliance comes from the result of what is happening in the country at the particular instant in time. And so sometimes progressives get the bad rap. Oh, you guys came and burned this and it damaged the country and etc. And you got that from even your own family members or your loved ones and etc. So like we said before, there are so many steps in this progressivism, and we'll be glad to discuss them as we go further into this program.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Kunney, let me come to you. I know sometimes when we think about progressive, we think about individuals and their followers. Let us look at some ideology, maybe slight differences between some of the leaders that you want to. How was Tipota looking at justice or economic? I mean, is there any difference between what Famula was looking at in terms of ideology? Share that with us if we can.
No, I don't think so. I think in general terms, what brought people around the progressive movement was on the basis of principle, not necessarily personalities or individuals. So in terms of promoting multi-party democracy in Liberia, in terms of social justice in Liberia, in terms of good governance in Liberia, in terms of fighting corruption in Liberia, in terms of working to engage in activities that uplift the poor masses of the country. Those were all galvanizing issues for the movement. And so it was not so much of the individual streak. Yeah, of course, individuals do have their own take in organizations, but the overall the appeal to Liberians from all across the country was because of these things, because of these ideas, because of these values. The activities of the progressive to educate Liberians on these issues, to empower Liberians to chart their own course. So these were the issues that were bringing people together, and those were the issues that attracted me, a 17-year-old at the time, to become a part of the movement. So I didn't, from where I was located, mind you now, the senior brother here is much more in tune with what is up. But from where I was located, way almost at the bottom, at the cadet level, I wouldn't know individual differences between the leaders, but that was not something that was manifested to the rank and file members. All we saw was our leaders were all committed to this principle, and we as militants and comrades, we were equally committed because our leaders, they held the line, they stood fast, and those were the motivating factors for us.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Freeman, can you give us an idea or paint a picture for us of what the situation was in Liberia? What exactly were the conditions in Liberia that spurred this movement? What were people unhappy with?
People were unhappy with a manifold of stuff that were happening in Liberia. For one thing, the indigenous people in Liberia were not availed to many of the institutions that were privileged in Liberia. Even some of the educational advantages that were availed to certain sections of the population were not readily available to many of the indigenous people in there. So there were those who spoke out about things like that. There were those who were in positions of power that influenced everything that was happening in Liberia, and yet the majority indigenous were not as involved in there. And when they spoke out about it, they came under some degree of repression. from the government. So the government was not of the majority in Liberia. That's just one instance. And then there were schools, some are building schools up country, what we call up country those days. In fact, they used to call it the hinterland. You see, you go into the hinterland. I mean, that in itself was an insulting word that was put on that aspect of the country. But everything had to be in the coastal areas that were mainly named after American cities and or people. You know, you were looking at Buchanan or Robertsport or Monrovia or Greenville or Harper. You know, so if you went to Saniquele, nobody knew what that was. When you went to Saniquele before 1961 and the Saniquele conference, and there people didn't care much about Saniquele or Voijama. Who cared to pronounce that name? It was a country name. Or Zozo. What kind of name is that? You know, or Banga. How can something almost with a B begin with G? So these were some of the disparities and things that brought people's eyes to be opened and to start to look at and see some of the inequities that were in Liberia.
All right, folks in cyberspace, you are watching Focus on Liberia, and we are discussing the progressive, the most talk about progressive. We're looking at the history, and we'll go into our two panelists' involvement for the progressive and some activities of the progressive. My question here is, was there any disagreements at all among the very progressive as to the way forward on the issue of governance? Mr. Kunney.
Well, you know, like I said, I mean, the progressive was a huge movement. So I want to believe there may have been areas of disagreement, but the common theme among the progressive in terms of governance was how to achieve multi-party democracy. You know, by the time up to the 1980s, Liberia was still a de facto one-party state. De facto, by law, I mean, there were avenues for other political parties to be created, but by 1980, the country was still a de facto one-party state. The last opposition political party, to my recollection, was the one led by D2, I think 1955, the United People's Party. After that, almost every opposition political party, there was nothing like an opposition political party in the country. So some of the things the brother mentioned, yeah, there were disparity in education, there were disparity in the economy. The economy was being controlled by a small minority of settler Liberians. The educational system, everything was just disproportionately done in the country. So there were times other leaders in the movement wanted to take other actions. There were other leaders that wanted to go to the formation of political parties, and other leaders that felt that maybe there needed to be more conscientization of the masses before the party could be formed. And other people, for example, the Progressive Alliance of Liberia bounced on the scene immediately and launched to the formation of political parties, as opposed to the Movement for Justice in Africa that was on the ground engaging in education and conscientization, training and everything. They waited all the way up to 1980, you know, before a decision could be taken for the formation of a political party. So I think I want to believe there were some differences in strategy, but the overall goal of eliminating the political, the economic barriers in our country was a goal that was shared by every progressive. And that was the call of the progressive movement.
So, Mr. Freeman, the same question, but I want to add, where do you think you can put the marker as the beginning of progressivism or the progressive movement in Liberia?
Like I said, I think it goes back to E.J. Roy and even the formation of the true Whig Party, the true Black Party, you know, the black-skinned people that came into there. But we can fast forward and come again when Tubman took hold of the True Whig Party and had gone beyond the 8 years. And so people like Coleman and Brownell came up in 1954 and formed what was called the Independent Whig Party. And they were supposed to be the progressives, but again, there was some degree of elitism in there, that they were the educated people and they knew much better than anybody else. They were not able to pull along the masses of the Liberian people. The semblance of mass gathering somehow came with H. Burma Fambule Sr.'s trial in the late 1960s. And then it gave, some impetus to some of the people at the University of Liberia and Kunney. You look at someone like Victoria Weeks, a lot of people don't know about him, but he was, within that movement and tried to bring about more and more conscientization. But then came, Tipote, and he brought a type of simplicity to the Liberian situation in terms of being environmentally using some of the stuff that we had available to us. And so he became very, very popular very quickly. But again, then the forces of oppression came and misinformation came in there and started to do their stuff. So he was joined by, by Sawyer, by Fambule, by people like me and Kunney and Yala and Lucia, many people that came on later were very, very popular and very strong. But we were looking at steps, so we started a project like Susuku, in Grangeda County. We felt that people that could feed themselves, people that had knowledge, were people that were empowered. When the Progressive Alliance of Liberia came, through the leadership of Bacchus Matthews, they had some of the same, aims and objectives as we had, like Kunney said earlier. But there was more of a revolutionary type, and we were more of an evolutionary type. And so in between there, somewhat April 14, 1979 happened, with so-called the rice riots, which is an anomaly. Rice was part of it, but the main part of that thing was people wanting to be empowered, people that felt that they were oligarchs and they could not break through.
So, Mr. Freeman, that brings to mind, did the progressives actually have a plan or a resolution or a list of demands for the government?
Yes, they did. And even going back to, when you look at David Coleman and Brownell and those people in the 1955 so-called the coup that failed. These people did not plan a military coup. All they were doing were demanding the rights as was described in the Constitution. When we started with the Moja in like 1973 and etc., what the main things that we were looking at was not just economic equality, but political equality. And so somehow to open the eyes of the Liberian people to know that their vote was important, that their organization was important. And so we were postulating the step-by-step thing that we had to do to bring the Liberian people along, because so many of our fathers and mothers spoke in whispers. They couldn't tell you anything. They'll be like, the president is coming tomorrow. It'll be like, what? And if you yell, the president coming tomorrow, and the guy angry with you, and maybe you got a slap or something like that. So we had to go from whispering to speaking where we could be heard. And once people began to hear some of the things that are very, very normal in today's society, you came under scrutiny. You were persecuted, and some people went to jail very, very early, very, very early in their lives, and so they were being stymied by the political organization of the time.
Thank you. I wanted both of you to attempt this question that I'm about to ask. Some of us who are just started paying attention, maintained that back then there was not much propaganda, but I don't want to make that assumption. I'm sure there was propaganda, but looking at today propaganda and then, which is more? That's the first one. And then yours that you had, the propaganda that you were up against, and probably that you had to engage into because it's also a political weapon. How effective was it in terms of communication? You didn't have cell phone. There was no internet. How were you guys reaching each other?
Dr. Kunney?
Yeah, Kunney, you on mute. Yeah,
You
go ahead.
mute me? You can hear me?
I can hear you now, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Before Brother Freeman come in, I just want to just quickly. My experience for me, I don't see during the days of the hard days of the progressive movement, what I saw was not propaganda. What I saw was education. What I saw was conscientization. Okay. For example, if you talk about Liberian citizens needed to own property before they can vote, and that was the law of the land, and many of the people in the country didn't know about that. Many of the so-called democracy we had at the time, if you don't have property, you can't vote. And then somebody come and say, look, this law is unjust. For me, that is not propaganda, that's education. So in the days, we were being educated on the social injustices, the economic injustices in the country. On the other hand, what the ruling class was doing, they were engaging in propaganda because they were looking at these Liberians and casting all of them as communists. People with foreign ideology. How is it a foreign ideology if somebody questions an unjust law on owning property before voting? So I didn't see much propaganda there. I saw much education, much conscientization, much training that leaders of the movement were determined to provide to Liberians so that Liberians can be aware of their own condition. Because part of creating change is for people to be aware of their environment. If you are aware of your environment, you are empowered to engage in the process of either initiating change, contributing to change. So I didn't see propaganda then. I saw people organizing to educate the Liberian people through things like even the literacy program that progressive were engaged in. Brother Freeman mentioned the Susuku project, telling people self-empowerment, how to empower yourselves and how to be economically successful or to understand the economic issues in the country.
All right. Mr. Freeman, this one for you is from Dave Ja. He's asking the question, what led to the disintegration of the progressive movement, the Moja, the LPP, the UPP, the New D? What led to the PPP as well? What led to the disintegration of all these movements?
Well, the thing about it is that these organizations, many of them specifically look at the LPP, the Liberian People's Party, an offshoot of the Movement for Justice in Africa. We were never really allowed to organize ourselves and to become as functional as we were supposed to be, because upon paying our fees and registering as a political party, we were banned. About $50,000, they took our registration list and immediately banned us. And so we had to try to refigure ourselves. We went into it with the Liberian Action Party, some of us, because we dispersed into different parties based upon how we felt. But most of us went with the Liberian Action Party, which we know won the election, that Joe took and proclaimed for his own victory. So within the movement, it's not just when one so say all. We had some arguments and disagreements within the movement. mainly on procedures. But like Kunney said, we had the belief that we needed participation by the population. And we tried to get that information out to as many as possible. We can also say at that time it was difficult. You asked about how we communicated. We communicated through verbalizations, just going and having conversations with people over the checkerboard, or going to Nukuta or West Point or Douala, wherever, or Simca in Monrovia, and going other parts of the country. Some of us went into adult literacy. I was the head of adult literacy in Nema, Lufa, and Bond. And we had people going into the villages. You left from classes in Cottington and went into some of the villages just to try to teach our people the ABC and 1, 2, 3. So that when simple documents were brought to them, they could read some of the words in there, hopefully read all of it. So we did these things because we knew that that was the basis upon which Liberia could grow. Unfortunately, we were prematurely interrupted by circumstances that came about later.
Let me read.
And just to add, Dennis, before you come in, what the brother just explained is the kind of brilliant, in my opinion, the kind of brilliant advocacy that was done in Liberia that I think is lacking today. I mean, imagine at that time, like as Sonny said, there was no Facebook page, there was nothing. But not only that, not that those things were absent, but the dissemination of even a slightly a contrary political view was met with the swiftest government action. There was no room to criticize anybody. There was no room to express political dissent anywhere. It was met with the stiffest action from government. But notwithstanding those conditions, these brothers, these people I will call the heroes of our nation, they were not deterred. They faced the challenges. Some of them faced it at the penalty of death. Some faced it at the penalty of denying themselves education. Some face it at the penalty of sacrificing their careers, their profession, just to educate the Liberian people. And the sad thing is that today we have all these megaphones all around us. And what we hear is the politics of personality as opposed to the politics of the issues. What is the core of this generation, really?
Thank you.
Yeah, we need to ponder on that. This generation that is very quick to criticize the progressive. What is their core? In my opinion,
Mr. Kunney, we'll come to the criticism against the progressive and we want you to answer. But let me read from our Facebook some question before Danielle comes in. Batom Kula, and I asked him to clarify. He has not clarified. He said, you guys were foolish, meaning the progressive. This is Dr. Batom Kula. You were operating from a position of white supremacists, but the problem was that you were blacks doing it to other blacks. That's Dr. Barton Kula. Joe Williamson say, what is the definition of progressivism as it pertains to the Liberian politics? Mr. Freeman, why don't you go first on those two questions and comment?
First of all, we never operated as supremacists. We were there sharing our time and our energies and whatever meager resources we had. We were sharing it with our own people. We were going into villages and sleeping there and doing everything that we could. Many of us went to prison multiple times that might not even be heard of. In places like Manga or in Zozo or in Vanjama or in Foya or even in Sanikwele or in Zwedru. Those did not make the news. When even we wore African shirts, we were questioned as to why we were. So we were using our time and energy. We were writing papers to conscientize people that were in Monrovia. We were traveling from place to place at our own expense and at multiple risks. But yet we stuck to it. And we did what we were supposed to do until many of us were exiled later. In our youth, we were exiled. And so we are here in this country, and we've been here for some time. So we did not go out there to show, what some people say, oh, just go out and show and be ostentatious. We did not. We went out there to work. We were genuine about what we did. And we tried to bring the Liberian population along to where they needed to be to help. And many, many people came along. Many of those brothers and sisters are in jail today. Are in the grades today. Many more were exiled like we were in our youth. And we're still going through some of the same things today.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Dr. Kula, who asked the question, said his statement was not towards the progressive. His statement was toward the state or the power that be. So thank you, Dr. Kula, for that clarification. Now to the question that Joe asked about progressivism. If I can read that again. What is the definition of progressivism as it pertains to Liberian politics? I think Mr. Kunney answered that before.
Exactly. So you want me to answer that again?
No,
I
no,
think you answered that already. Danielle?
Okay, all right. So I guess this is in line with criticisms. So the progressive movement seemed to really catch steam during President William Talbert's administration. And some people would say that Talbert was a much more progressive president than the previous president, President Tubman. And that he had implemented some changes within the country. What was it, or why did you feel that what he was doing was not enough, or why was he not trusted with more time to accomplish what may have been the progressive agenda?
Mr. Freeman.
President Talbot was one of the smartest presidents that we've ever had. He was tied with the manacles of what the True Party had been historically. And he tried his best to get out of there, but the manacles were too tight. We were willing in the Moja, I'm going to talk about the Moja, not anything against the PAL or the PPP. We were willing in the Moja to work with President Talbot. We had criticisms for him. We disagreed with him, but he too recognized that we were a force that could not just be pushed aside. And so we tried in there. That's why we were looking through an evolutionary process. An evolutionary process that lasted, for 50,000 or so years. But we thought that within 10 to 20 years was, to bring the Liberian people to a certain extent wherein we could then launch ourselves even better as a group of people understanding what their destiny was. But Talbot, he was someone who had many progressive ideas. Fortunately, in the True Party, there wasn't space for expansion. Had Talbot come in with another party and become president, I do feel that he would have done much, much better.
Mr. Freeman, let me push that question a little bit more before Mr. Kunney comes. I'll call you Dr. Kunney. So before Mr. Kunney comes in, because the progressive in many quarters are being held responsible for the 1980 coup or for the death of President Talbot.
Which is just totally wrong. We were as surprised on April 12th of 1980. I remember company we said had come up to visit me at Cuttington, and Rodney Chester, whose father was justice minister at the time. He and I were, we used to get up on Saturday mornings and jog about 18 to 20 miles. And Rodney and I were standing out when company came outside and said to me, he said, Bo, I tried to put your radio on and it keeps playing the national anthem. And I said to him, because we had formed the LIMSU, exactly 1 year before on the 14th of April when they had the 1979 rice riots. And I told him, I said, every time you up here, something happens. And it's usually not good. No, we did not. We did not push anything that was there. We had no idea of that military coup. And when it came up, Progressives stood up and came up with statements to the PRC as to what we thought were condemnable, what we thought were not in the interest of the Liberian people. And we were the first set of people who on June 5th of 1980 read a petition to the Liberian National Students Union to expand the PRC from 12 to I think 36 people in there. We were the first to stand up and ask the PRC to give us a timeline as to when we will return Liberia to civilian rule. We were the first to put forth so many things that came up in Liberia at the time. And what did it land us? It landed many of us in jail, some of us in the graveyards, and many more in exile.
Mr.
Wow.
Kunney?
Yeah, in addition to what the brother said, look, the issue of President Talbot and the progressive can be compared to a situation, the situation with Gorbachev in the Soviet Union and the collapse of that entire system. President Talbot, despite his progressive ideas, was presiding over an oligarchy. He was presiding over an oligarchy, and that oligarchy was entrenched. It was resistant to change, and it was unwilling to share either political or economic power with the majority of Liberians, despite the progressive ideas of President Talbot. And has Talbot started to push some of these ideas, my brother, the call for change for Liberia has grown louder. It's like Gorbachev coming at a late time to push perestroika. But you see, when you oppress people for such a long time, when the oppressed people are aware of their condition and they're suffering for such a long time, and at the dying minute, what we call injury time in politics, you come up with all of these things, you are likely not to survive. At the dying minute of the Soviet Empire, Gorbachev was pushing all these reforms that you have been pushed long time. And the Soviet people didn't listen to him because the call for change was louder and louder and louder. So I want to believe he was just an unfortunate victim of history. Maybe, like the brother said, if he had become president, much sooner than the time he assumed the presidency, maybe things would have been different. But the movement for change in Liberia was so loud that to the point where the incremental changes that Talbot was introducing, mind you, he was progressive, but he was still continuing the policies of the Truth Party. He was still continuing the policies he had not departed from the policy. He had not departed from the party. So he could not survive the wave of change that was coming. And the point that the brother also made, the progressive community, especially the movement for justice in Africa, did not sit quiet during the reign of the PRC. They took the same level of advocacy and energy in the PRC. As a result, if you check the PRC government, elements from the movement for justice in Africa, they had a short lifespan in the PRC. People like Dr. Tukwada Tipotet was exiled from the PRC in less than a year. Community we say had to flee Liberia. So the fact that, the progressive, they didn't stand up and they didn't do this, it's all people who trying to read the history backwards. And the other point I want to make is those who, anyway, you say we will come to that point, so let me hold that point. Because there are some Liberians that present Liberia as a haven before the progressive advocacy. You know, using the ignorance of the people at the time that people didn't know what these things meant. They think that everything being quiet, Liberia was such a great country until the arrival of the progressive, and then the country got destroyed. Now the country got destroyed from its very founding, from the very belief of those who founded the country that felt that the huge majority of that people they were heathens. This is the fundamental belief they have, that the majority of our people, they were heathens, they needed to be Christianized. Disregarding the culture of our people, disregarding the social economic condition of our people, to refer to the rest of our people as being heathen and that needed to be Christianized. They were pagans. These were not just words. These were a governing philosophy that oligarchy used for the over 100 years that led to the kind of disparities we're talking about. And even those of us that were younger, look, it was embarrassing for you to even have for you to even call your country name. They laugh at you. Lately at the Louis Underground School of Law, there are many evidence where there's a lady that I just forgot her name. We take the liberty to make fun of indigenous names. Oh, where this country is going now, we all want to be lawyer now. Where are we going? And many people take this thing for granted. They take them for granted.
Thank
Liberia
you.
was no heavy. Liberia was a bad society. Bad society.
Thank you, Mr. Kunney. And Mr. Freeman, one of the queries from what I've been listening to from many people that you had with the Thomas administration is the practice of nepotism. How big was it with the Talbot administration? I mean, you know, how big was it, and how was it impacting his decision making in terms of governance?
Like we say, you know, and Queen emphasized just shortly, he came in with a vessel. You know, if someone asks you for water to drink, and you take the plain water and put it in a dirty vessel for them to drink, the water is now contaminated and it's not the clean water that it was. It assumed the identity of the vessel in which you go to present this water. This was what happened to Talbot. He came in with very great ideas. Talbot wanted to make Tawanatipote his first economic cabinet minister. He wanted Jackson Fayado from Limba County to be his vice president. He wanted to bring on certain other people. He wanted some of the young people like Ijoma Flinister to be in his cabinet. He saw these things. But when he brought it to the elder members of the party, it wasn't accepted. So he had to try to appease them, because this was the party. These were the people, some of which had given him his first job. You know, when he came into the party, these are people that he had grown up with. These are people that he was related to. So all of these were vestiges that were hanging on him, that weighted him down to the extent that what he came up with, the policies that he thought, you know, and the slogans of total involvement for higher heights, you know, all of these things, and even some of the things that he wanted to fight, he could not go out to fight them because, you know, he needed to bite down these things, and these people made sure that they had made him toothless. And so it became a major problem for Talbot. Unfortunately, it culminated into what happened in 1980. And the progressive movement of the Moja had nothing to do with it, like some people say. You know, the progressive movement, there were no progressives in there. And Kunney said after, earlier that, we had the shortest lifespan of people that were serving in that administration because we were there not too long into that administration. And everything that we fought for, they made sure they fought against. And they killed many, many young people that we cannot name here today.
Wow. Mr. Young?
And just quickly, Asani,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The people that talk about the progressive being responsible for the coup, these people are also ignoring the kind of geopolitical environment that existed in it at the time, the East-West politics. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
The Soviet expansion, the US expansion. Look, many African countries were victims of this ideological fight. If you look at the people that staged the coup, no one can trace any of those soldiers to any of the progressive movement. No one. Nobody knows where this group of soldiers came from to stage a coup.
Mr. Kunney,
let me make the point.
no, I just want to inject something before you land. Because what people are saying was when the coup took over, the progressive were the cabinet ministers. So they look like the advisors to the military people.
Exactly. There's no dispute about that. But that does not lead to the causation of the coup. We're talking about, who caused the coup?
Right. It's like separating the dance from the dancer now. If the coup happened and the progressives are the minister, they look like the architect as well.
Well, this is what I'm saying. For you to draw that conclusion too, it just reflects that people are not willing to even search deeper to do a much more a strong analytical work. Like I'm telling you, you had the East-West politics. All the people that organized the coup, none related to the progressive movement. You had the Soviet and American competition for world dominance. At the time, you had President Talbot also on his own that were articulating international politics that show independence from the Western hemisphere. He was bringing in, he was tilting towards the East. The Romanians were coming to Liberia, the Cubans, the Russians, and then he was promoting this non-aligned movement. Some of that were causing great concern in Washington. In fact, many people don't know the first president to call for a two-state solution was President Talbot addressing the United Nations General Assembly when it was unheard of. Two-state solution in the Middle East. The first president to call for that was President Talbot. So I'm saying, instead of rushing to conclusions that the progressive caused the coup, I'm just saying, let us open our eyes to other variables that existed to see where the coup may have come from. There's no dispute that when the coup came, progressive were in the government. That's true. But could we find another reason for that coup to gain acceptance? You needed the progressive to be in the government. Maybe. Nobody knows. But it is completely different from making a factual statement to say the progressive led to the coup. I'm saying there were all the issues of international politics, geopolitical rivalry that existed that, in my opinion, seem more plausible to lead to that coup than the activities of the progressive.
But in addition to that, Kunney, let's go back into the time and visit that time when the people from the progressives that were into that immediate cabinet were mainly from the PAL, the Progressive Alliance of Liberia, later on the Progressive People's Party. Not faulting them with anything, but Bishop Brown had to talk to some of the people that we had in the LPP because they were
right. Some technical problem there from Mr. Freeman's.
Yeah, I think he froze there. Again, folks. Okay, he's back, I think. Mr. Freeman, we can't hear you.
maybe somebody was.
Yeah, somebody called him and that's affected his sound there.
Yeah. So what happened is that many of these progressives that joined the movement then were at the urges of some other influential Liberians who told them, if you guys decide not to do anything now, then you cannot blame these people for anything that happens because they don't know exactly what to do. So there were, some progressives very reluctantly took these positions. But what people forget is that when you became a cabinet minister, I think you were given the rank of major. If you were a minister, you were a major in the army. You know what happens when you're in the army? You follow the military rule. So as uneasy as many of the progressives were, they went into these positions trying to see if they could make a difference. Unfortunately, again, if you have a dirty vessel and you put some clean waters in there, that water becomes with the contamination of the vessel in which it is. That is why many of the progressives, and you look at people there and Wilmot and I'm just naming the guys in our own movement. So they had to leave and come aboard earlier than most people thought. Because,
Mr. Freeman, before you end there, Mr. Freeman,
yeah.
you call the PRC the dirty vessel?
The PRC at the time was a vessel that was not what was conducive to the Liberian situation. And when I say a dirty vessel, I'm looking at the overall conditions belying the times. Kunney related before the East and West struggle that were bearing down now on us. Even the PRC members themselves were under tremendous pressure from various factors that Samuel Doe and Western and Kunney and these boys, they were under tremendous pressure to do things that were not as amenable to the Liberian society as it should have been. But they themselves too came with certain ammunition that was not there. They had an ammunition of guns. They didn't have the ammunition of experience and education, so they were easily molded into some other people's aspirations that did not suit the Liberian situation.
Gentlemen, we got a caller on the line who identified himself as progressive. Do we bring the caller in now, or you have something else to ask?
Bring him in.
All right. Caller on the line, you are live. Your question or comment?
I'm Sanyokno Nyasio.
Sanyokno Nyasio, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Come in briefly and you identify yourself as a progressive.
Hello, Mr. Yansio.
I'm not only a progressive, I am progressive. I want to commend Freeman and Kunney. Freeman, I might have been familiar with him, but I have worked with Kunney on several occasions. There's some questions I just want to answer briefly. You asked, who are the progressive? In Liberian term, progressive are troublemakers. Anybody who questions the government about the ills of society, they brand them as troublemaker. So progressive are troublemakers, those that want to change how things are going on in our country. Another thing I want to address, Liberia is a failed experiment. Liberia, the reason why we have all these problems, those people that they deported, Liberia was not established by people who love the country, this and that. They want for the people, the Negroes at that time, to be in their society. So they found a place to send them. So they were deported. The Liberian history that we read is the history of the settlers. any history that does not include the people, the original people, is not a history, it's one-sided. So as a field experiment, these people, they were victims of their own environment. So what they saw the slave master were doing, that's exactly what they repeated in Liberia. I just want to make that very clear. Another one, they say if we have propaganda, we have propaganda.
Mr. Yancey,
our propaganda, the progressive propaganda.
Mr. Yancey, before you continue, what does you say, or they were deported? What does that have to do with the progressive? Because I don't know.
But what that has to do, it has a lot to do with the progressive. It affected the progressive group to bring about changes. Because these masters, they had a master and slave relationship. And that's the same thing they brought. So we, the progressive, who the troublemaker, was trying to change that. In America, you have a turner, revolt. You have a lot of revolts. So the same thing, when they brought it and implemented it, the progressive went against that. And they banned them. But you see, one of the things that the people who accuse the progressive, what they fail to understand, the progressive was against extender as well as extender forces. You brought in Talbot. Talbot was a progressive in his sense, but Talbot was being fought by his people. He wanted change. He embraced the progressive idea. He wanted change. We were working with Talbot, but the people in the Tory party, they were fighting against him. Then you have the United States, because when he came, he went and joined the non-alliance. He went and joined the non-alliance, and he made a lot of changes that were very good for Africa. Then they went after him. Talbot was not overthrown by any internal forces. He was overthrown by external forces to stop the progress that we were making. Another thing I want to say, I want to talk about, when you take progressive, who were the progressive? In that country history, we have a lot of progressive. Let's start with Joan Nimle. Joan Nimle was a progressive who fought with the Howard. Howard admired him so much, he calls him Wonderful Nimle. Wonderful Nimle. What did he do to Nimle? They exiled Nimle to Bopolu. Yeah, a fisherman who is used to the Atlantic Ocean, the sea coast. You exile this man because he was fighting against what these people were doing. That they exiled him in Bopolu. When he came back, it didn't take too long that he died. So, my people, there are a lot of stuff. If you're talking about the progressive, let me give. I am a Mojan. I became a Mojan in 1974 when I was recruited in the United States. Let me give you a good example. It asks, were there problems between the progressive? Yes, we have serious problem between PAL and Moja. You see, in order to take over our country, you have to conscientize the people. The people have to be educated for why they are fighting. You cannot go in the interior and say, we want to overthrow it. You got to tell the people what they were doing. You got to tell them that the taxes that you were paying, the people in Monrovia were not paying taxes. And they were brutalizing you, put you in the sun, abuse you in the presence of your people. You got to organize. This is what we were doing. We're not in a hurry. We have people who are teaching literacy in the interior, telling the people in simple English. And the people were catching up with that. Then they started branding some of us as communists. And you remember, it was during the Cold War. It was the East against the West. So when that idea that the government does not like, they call you communists. Even they was also a victim. Start referring to us as communists and so forth. So, gentlemen, look, I'm very pleased with the two guys, Freeman and Kunney, they actually touched most of the things that I would have touched. But the progressive, for people to say that the progressive didn't do anything, if the progressive didn't do anything, you got multi-party system. Who did that? It was the progressive. Those students that at the university now who are talking, who are writing, like the colleagues and other people, where did they get it from? They didn't just gather and dream about it. We did that. But in the revolution, things will happen. You see how they killed a lot of our leaders in the third world who were progressive. So even the Gorbachev example was a very good one. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you. These are my points I wanted to make.
Thank you.
I just say hi to Yansel. I've heard Yansel, we haven't seen each other for a
Am I on, Mr. Ja?
I don't know if Yansel.
Am I on, Mr. Ja?
Yes, you're on. Hold on.
I'm here.
All right.
Muted.
Okay. Thank you. Daniel, you want to come in before bringing more callers?
Well, one question. So Mr. Kunney explained that the progressive movement was not the cause of the coup. Would you say that the progressive movement was the cause of the rice riot?
No, the progressive movement was not even the cause of the rice riot. The progressive movement was not the rice riot was initiated by government action. It was government response to the peaceful assembly of Liberian citizens that led to the riot. It's not the progressive didn't call for a riot. The progressive alliance of Liberia at the time called on their partisans to assemble at their headquarters to discuss the possible increase in the price of rice. It is the government response to that peaceful assembly allowed by law that led to the riot. So the progressive, that's one of the myths. This is another myth. This is another myth that people's misinformation that they carry around. I don't recall any progressive movement calling the Liberian people to a riot.
Looking back now, would you say even the issue of the increase in rice price, looking back now, do you think that was actually an issue? Or do we look back now and say, well, that probably goes with just the trend of inflation, or, you know, rice, we can't keep a good or a commodity at the same price forever. Can we look back now and say that maybe the increase wasn't astronomical, maybe it was necessary?
Well, listen, the increase in the price of any basic commodity is a big thing for the poor people. Period. And poor people should be allowed to express how they feel about these things in our political system. The response should not be a repressive response from a government. People should have the right to react to government policies, to make their views known on government policies. And that the response should not be that the government will unleash the forces of terror on the people. So we got to get that part of the history right. The progressive did not call for a rice riot. The government action led to a riot. The progressive called for the assembly of their partisans to discuss a possible increase in the price of rice. Mind you, every member that went to that place, they left their various homes and went to their party headquarters without a riot. It was only after the government action. So it is the government that caused the riot, not the progressive.
All right.
And I think in a democracy, people should be allowed to respond to government policy in a peaceful and organized manner. Whether the policy is good, whether it's right, that's another thing.
Okay, Mr. Freeman, before you come in to add to what to answer Daniel's question, here is a question from Blamoto. It said bikers, Oscar Quio, Marcus Down, and the rest of the leaders of the POW promised to bring rice and sell it to Liberians for $9 per 100-pound bag. This never happened when they were in government. So besides that, the progressive being responsible for the 1979 riot, what's about this thing about the price of rice that the PAL was going to sell the price of rice lower than what the government was going to sell it.
That was a statement made by the PAL. As a member of Moja, I was not, given to all of the modalities that they had in there. But the main thing you're talking about here is the rice, and Kunney really put it, in a very succinct and apt way that to explain it. But the price of rice was going from $10 to 20, in even instances $30. And when some people were making $50 a month, were making $120 a month, you think about that increase in the price. That is why so many people responded to going out to the Progressive Alliance of Liberia's call to come out so that they could have what they deemed a peaceful protest. Like my late father said, my father said they should have allowed these people to march. They could have marched for 2-3 weeks, and they would eventually have to go home. But we decided to send ammunition, armed men out there, to the extent that 276 people, that's the lower estimate, were massacred on that day. Now, anyone who can come on and justify the explanation as to these people being killed because as Liberians they could not march for what they saw as an injustice, I'd like to hear their own explanation.
All right. Somebody is asking the question. I hope the caller who brought it up is still around, Mr. Jad. He referred to the American Liberians, the free slaves, the settlers, whatever way you want to classify them, as being deported. And somebody is asking the question, what evidence does he have to show that these people were not repatriated, but instead deported? Because the history continued to use the word repatriate, but this person, our caller said, they were deported.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Jansen will come back in shortly because he's got off the line, but he's coming in. He's only listening to us through the. So let's bring in one caller. The last 4 digits 6060. You are live. Caller, call your name and where you calling from. 215-824-6060. Are you there? All right. That caller is not there. Mr. Yansio, there's a question here for you. What evidence do you have that the ex-slaves were deported instead of repatriated? Mr. Yansio. All right, let's go to William King. Mr. Yansio is still not ready. William King is a fellow right here at Focus on Liberia. Mr. King, you are live. William. Why we can hear the callers? Okay, let me try Aliyu Kamara. Aliyu Kamara, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Well, while we figure out the phone issue, I'll pose a question to our guests.
So those in the back room, please check our phone line. We are not able to hear our callers.
Okay, so my question.
Hold on, Mr.
All right, let's try that again.
Okay, so my question to both of you is looking back now at the progressive movement that started, in the 60s, 70s. Do you think it had a positive impact on Liberia and its history and where we are today? Mr. Kunney, I'll start with you first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The progressive movement had a huge impact on on Liberia today. I mean, one of the fundamental things, multi-party democracy. Here we have it. That was the signature issue of the progressive movement, to create an environment where Liberians would be able to freely elect their own leaders. As a result of the sacrifice made by that generation of brave Liberians, today we have multiplicity of parties in our country. Today, a Kunney can be elected by his own people. A Zoe can be elected. Anybody can be elected, because now we have the environment for multi-party democracy. That's one of the greatest achievements of the progressive movement.
Any negative, Mr. Kunney? Any negative?
In fact, the movement met the challenge of their generation. This is what the progressive movement, like Brother Kamara said, Freeman said, they've been fighting for this from the founding of the nation. It just didn't start with Moja. You know, the recent past, you go to the Roy, you go to the Coleman, you go to D12. Finally, despite the fact that we had some violent periods, but multi-party democracy is alive in Liberia. So that generation, they met that challenge. The question is, what is this generation doing? It is the failure of this generation to improve our democracy that is leading to some of the things that we are having. And because this generation failed, they are blaming the progressive for bringing multi-party democracy. And you know, it's so sad.
Mr. Kunney,
like, yeah.
I was asking you any negative. You talk about the positive, you know, but anything negative or the negative impact of the progressive movement?
I don't see anything. Look, I don't see anything negative about fighting for social justice. I don't see anything negative about fighting for equality. I don't see anything negative about fighting for a fairer distribution of economic opportunities. I don't see anything negative about fighting for the participation of all Liberians in the political process. I don't see anything negative in those.
Mr. Jai. Mr. Jai.
Yes, sir.
You want to go to the phone line?
Yeah, okay, let's go back to the phone line.
Okay.
Mr. Yancia, can you hear me? Mr. Yancia, can you hear me?
What's going on? We can hear them from there.
Mr. Aliyu Kamara, can you hear me?
Well, let it do Facebook question.
Oh, Mr. Jai, I think it might be coming from free conference call because everything looking good from my end here.
All right.
So let me ask this question. Mr. Jai, you asked a question about failure, whether there was any failure on the part of the progressive. Why
I wanted Mr. Freeman to take that.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Freeman, let me ask this one. Do you progressive feel that the voters, the Liberian people, you believe you fought for so hard with your blood and sometimes, or in some instances, with your life, did they really fail you? Because you wanted to represent them, not only as minister, you know, many of you or some of you contested for the presidency, some of your leaders, and the Liberian people didn't vote for them to win. So do you feel that the Liberian people actually fail you after all you've done for them?
There is a statement, a parable that says when one has been bitten by a snake, you see a worm and you run away.
Yes, hello. Normally I would be able to hear the talk show being broadcasted as well. But
okay.
If you can hear me,
okay,
just so you know, I cannot hear you. I can't hear you.
William.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call back in.
We can hear you.
We can hear you, William, so be there. All right, go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
Mr. Freeman, Mr. Freeman, do you have any regrets about the progressive, anything negative? And then you go to.
I don't have regrets. You know, there were some things that happened that probably should not have happened in the way they happened. But do I have regrets? No. the things that I feel sad about when I think of someone like Wu Gabi Tapia who was killed, amongst many young people. I was a teacher at Tubman High when I returned to school in 1985 after the November 12th attempt by Kuwakban. And one of the saddest moments that I had going to teach a difficult subject like chemistry was walking into a classroom and seeing empty seats. You looked at those seats, knowing within your mind and with your person that these seats were empty because those kids were never coming back, that they had been put in some mass grave or had been greatly injured. They still bring back haunting memories today when you think about it. Those are some of the real negatives, not negatives, those are some of the things that you take out of there, you say, wow, I hope something else would have happened in a way that these students, these young people would have, been living today. We were creating a sort of a brain drain. And not only that these were some of the brightest minds that we had, but these are some of the people that were most dedicated to changes in Liberia, and that they were never given the chance. And it is still sad to remember that today.
Yeah, and then to Mr. C's question about the voters.
Can you say that again?
Mr. Sears asked a question about the voters. The progressive, as you have said, fought very hard. But anytime a progressive attempt for the presidency, the voters, they're saying something else. What's responsible for that?
Fear. Many of these people were afraid, especially when it came after the war, and they were asked to elect people. I had just gone to Liberia previous to bury a younger brother of mine. And as I was stating earlier, there is a parable that says that when one has been bitten by a snake, they see a worm and they run away. And many of the people felt out of fear that if they did not vote in a particular way, war was coming back to Liberia. So they were not voting their conscience, they were voting their fears. And is it a matter of failure? In some instances, of course, you can say that's some degree of failure. But for the most part, when people are afraid, looking for a way to just live in peace, some decisions can be made that are wrong. But again, I come back to the Liberian people, you get the leadership you deserve. When you vote for what you vote for, you cannot blame anybody else. Don't blame the progressives. You can only blame yourself for what you voted for.
Thank you. And Mr. Kunney, I want to ask the question. It's important to me. I asked Mr. Freeman earlier whether there was any failure on the part of the voters, whether they feel you, the progressive, having advocated for them. He just answered it. But the question I want to ask you is, to you, who have been involved with the progressive, do you feel at some point at all that, wow, with all we've done for our people, they know us? We come from the same villages and they couldn't vote for any of our leaders. Do you feel that they really feel you? You unmute. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes the disappointment can be there, especially so when you see the people having freely elected their own leaders, they leave those that they've elected and they blaming their own elected. You understand what I'm saying? They leave those that they freely elected. Mind you, since the inception of our truly democratic process, let's say from the period of the war, 1997 election, every election, progressive has always been part of the ticket. There has always been progressive on the ticket. Every election from 1997, 2005, 2011, 2017. And the Liberian people continue to decide, repeatedly decide, against the progressive elements that are on the ballot.
Can
Now,
you tell us who some of those people were? Who are some of the progressives on the ballot?
1997, Dr. Tobana Tipote was a presidential candidate. Bacchus Matthews was a presidential candidate. Fast forward to 2005, Dr. Tobana Tipote was a presidential candidate along with other progressives. 2011, Marcus Dan, I think, Guama Famule, all of these two were progressive. 2017, Famule was a progressive. And not only that the Liberian people reject these progressives, they reject them with so low votes. To the point it's like, look, we don't even want to see you talk about leadership in this country. And that is remarkable. It is remarkable in the sense that when they make these fundamental decisions and things are crumbling, then they go to the same people they don't give power. And it depends, oh, the progressive was in the government. There's a difference in you leading the government than being part of the government. Because you who lead the government, you develop the policies of the administration. If you are part of the government, you are required to follow the policy of the government or leave. So you're not setting policy. But the Liberian people, they will reject the progressives at the polls. And when issues get difficult in the country, they say the progressives fill the country consistently for almost 20 years. It's like, again, let's look at this example. The ANC in South Africa, they fought for the African majority in South Africa. When the time came, the people of South Africa, they gave the ruling mandate to the ANC. They said, look, you advocated for us now, so you lead us. But just imagine for a moment, if the South African majority had given power to either Buthelezi or to the apartheid leaders, and then when things start to go wrong, they say, oh, Mandela, you brought us this far. That's the mindset of the Liberian people. The other example, the Liberian people, we fought war. Sierra Leone fought war. The Liberian people went to election and elected the very warlords that killed them, that traumatized them, that maimed them, that destroyed them. In Sierra Leone, not a single warlord was elected. So we have to ask ourselves, who is failing? Is it the progressive or the Liberian people failing themselves? You see, this is why I'm saying what is called failure in this current time. It's not so much of the failure of the progressive, it is the failure of this generation. I challenge you to go out there and pick any group, whether it's a political party, whether it is an individual, that is building anything that involves a national consensus to rally the Liberian people. Everybody is advocating for the belly. It's belly politics. They advocate for now so that they can get a benefit for now. Nobody wants to plant the tree that will yield fruits tomorrow. Everybody wants to plant the tree and eat it now.
I know you're infly, but I disagree, Mr. Kunney, and let me give you just one example. Focus on Liberia. We're not doing this for money.
My man said political group.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm saying,
Mr. Kunney, hold on. Let me try the callers if they can hear me. Mr. Yancey, can you hear me?
Can I just
William, can you hear me? Oh, sorry.
Yes,
I can hear you.
Okay, Mr. Yancey.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, Yancey, first, there's a question for you. All we learned from our history book was ex-slaves were repatriated to Liberia. You are saying they were deported. There's a question here for you. What's your evidence?
Go to Lincoln. Lincoln, I can't quote him right now. Lincoln's speech that he would rather free the slave. I mean, I don't have the quote right with me, but Lincoln just.
You mean President?
If I can Google it, I will tell you. Lincoln told them that the proclamation that he said he freed the slaves, that's not true. He did not. He said he'd rather send these people out of this country than for them to be part of this society.
All right.
So they were deported. They were deported.
Okay.
The government made appropriation. The government made appropriation when it met in the hotel. They made appropriation. But because America could not have, what do you call it? could not have, there's a word I was looking for. They could not participate like the other European leaders to have oversee settlement or something like that. So they went their colony rather. Yes, so they could not have oversee colonies. They went and decided among themselves. Those were the elite who did not want black who were free, because there were a lot of revolt that were going on. It was not successful because they had people who were among them that will go and tell them. So since Haiti was very successful, and a lot of those white people that ran away, that came by Florida, they felt that if these people continue to be free blacks among them, the blacks would do the same thing to aid them. So that's how they came with this strategy to deport the people and say, let's do that. They followed the British model, and that's how they. But there are a lot of evidence that I can make readily to that these people decided they were deported. They were not kind to say that they were philanthropic people who loved the people and were doing, because a lot of the blacks, some of the blacks reported that they didn't know Africa. They said that they knew here, they've been here all along in America, so Africa was not a place for them to go. So they were split among those people.
I think whether they were deported or repatriated, these were ex-slaves that were returning to a country or to a place where their forefathers came from. So no matter the terminology we may use, Africans were coming back to Africa. Let me go to William King. William, you're live.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to read something, and Dennis is going to take 1 minute to read. When his 1 minute is up, just tell me time, okay? And I want to ask the thoughts from our panelists, please. My name is William King, of course. My ancestors are true Whig Party people, and I'm a proud member of Focus on Liberia. So let me read this little excerpt. This is from Journey of a Liberian Mining Engineer, wrote by Joseph G. Richards. This is about the progressive stuff. It says, President Williams via Tubman controlled Liberia for some 27 years. Just about everyone was tired of Tubman and a true Whig Party for the whole his doctrine had of Liberia. The country's leadership consisted of old men who had been in power for an inordinate number of years. We could have easily had another group of heroes who could have broken this hold. I am thinking of such men as Marcus Matthews, Wilmot, Amos Sawyer, Drew Mason, Rudolph Robert Tipperton, George Bullock, Charles Topper, and others. Unfortunately, these men wanted to usher in a new day of socialism and communism and were responsible for the 13 men being put on a light post and shot to death on South Beach. They wanted a change, not realizing that change is one of the most difficult things to achieve. Their change was to usher in a political system of government to either a socialist or communist one. They were directly and indirectly responsible for killing 200,000 citizens. Their methods were not only taught to the educated, but to many who were simply misinformed or fooled, as in the case of the rice riot. They told the people that government purposefully held a ship out of sea that was bringing in rice. At the same time, they told the police rice that the people's rice could be sold at somewhere around $10, while rice was selling for $21. This $10 rice was actually chicken feed, which could be sold for $10, as that rice would be about 70% broken, as compared to the better grade rice, which is at a maximum 20% broken. So I conclude with this one. Another instance when they misinformed the people was when President Tubman made cars available to take some members of the group up country to see what developmental progress was being made. I am told they would alert the pupils of the high school they would arrive at 11 a.m. They instead arrived purposefully at 12 noon and later called a couple of leaders who were at the time very hot and uncomfortable and of course sweating. They would say, reach in a car, put your head in it, and see how cool and nice it is. This is what they are enjoying, and it can be yours. Only go and take it. Thus, this was planting a seed of hatred and greed in them. It was therefore easy to manipulate the community into whatever actions they wanted. Lord save us from heroes like them. Such statements were made to incite riots, leading to revolution.
Look, let me come in.
I close this.
Hold on,
I
Mr.
close
Yancia.
this.
No, but
Hold on.
Mr. Yancia, you will speak.
conclude.
I'm just reading, then you can comment. I'm just reading from the book.
Okay,
I'm closing
William.
right now.
William,
The man
that's
to stop. Yes, time up.
we need to call you to time.
Thank you. I want to know their thoughts about this. Thank you.
No, please go ahead and summarize what you just read in 30 seconds so they can respond.
No, that's it. I just wanted to know what the thoughts were, because there's two opposing views of what the progressives were about. From one side, they felt like they had a very good agenda, and from other side, there's a commentary such as this. So I want to know what the thoughts were about stuff like this that was taking place at that time.
Let me come in.
Yeah.
Okay, come in, Mr.
Let me
Yancia.
come in.
You have 1 minute.
That's what you read is just pure propaganda. They are saying that Liberia, some people were saying Liberia was sweet. Liberia was sweet at the expense of who was it as sweet? What you just read is Liberian history. When I say Liberian history, I'm talking about settler history. The people were enjoying. There's a book that you need to read. It's called by these people, Growth, 1944, Growth Without Development. There were a lot growth without development. Liberia had all the resources, all the money that could be used at that time. But who they use it on? They use it on themselves. They had their farms where they have our indigenous mothers were on there, our people were working on there, and all of these things. So the person who wrote that thing, Richardson or whoever he is, he doesn't know Liberian history. I mean, the history of colonialism. He doesn't know that. For him to write such a sweet thing, the same thing with Matilda Newport. Matilda Newport existed, but she didn't do what she did. They wrote that history. Nathaniel Regency, I told him to task. I mean, they wrote the history and to say our people were so stupid.
Thank you,
You know,
Mr.
that our people would line up, and then the woman who cannot speak indigenous language will tell the people to go and stand up, and so she can take coal from her pipe. Coal does not light a candle. It has to be flammable. So those are the kind of history that revisional history. It doesn't rap. That's the Tarzan story, something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Yancia. Let our panelists respond. Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, Yancia, put it rightly. It's easy, that's why sometimes you break the word up. You say, you know what, that is his story. Now, what's our story? Okay? We need to define what his story is and what our story is. We lived these times when many of these people were in their opulent homes, were living lavishly off the sweat of the brow of the people. They could not relate to what the history actually is. And there were others amongst them that lived and understood what the Liberian problems were. But they were, even though they understood it, they were not willing to accept it as is. So what they did, they came in here and they dressed it up.
All right.
These people got a statement here saying, you put a lipstick on a pig, it's still going to be a pig.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Let me bring in our last caller for the light. That's Aliyu Kamara. Aliyu, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Yes. Oh, I am so happy. I'm almost excited to be here. And I'm glad to have some brothers in the studio today. When I said big brothers, Denver and Anthony, don't get over your head. I'm not talking about you too much. Yeah, I've read really do admire Mr. Kunney. He's a big brother. I tell you that. This guy got it. He got the real progressive back in the day that we used to try to look like my phone or to listen to them back in the day. You know. Just like they said, the history of the other guy was reading about I'm the who that in my second grade. Listen to that about the Matingo people who can look good. But anyway, I want to ask these two brothers in studio. We have this information that Paul Bird was a progressive president and Paul Bird was changing the country. But Willis Thomas died in 1971. Paul took over, and he was in power for 9 years. During those 9 years, was there any discussion on the part of Paul Bird to transition the government in a way that they will have elections or something that within those 9 years, did he ever talk anything about elections? And even during the time he died, that 1980, before April, January of 1980, maybe February, March, did Talbot mention anything about elections in the country? I really need to understand that, because when I hear he was a progressive, the progressive had a completely different modus operandi. And Talbot years would start for symbolic changes. But I really want to know what made Talbot a progressive. Thank you.
Thank you. Our panelist, Mr. Aliyu Kamara, is asking, what made President Talbot progressive? Was he thinking about elections up to the 9 years he was there? What happened? Was he talking about election? And I want to add to that, at the time President Talbot was president, we still had the preamble of the Liberian Constitution saying, we the people originated from the United States. That constitution was still not inclusive. So based on that, what made Talbot progressive?
Who's starting with?
Let's start with Mr. Kunney, because it looked like Mr. Kunney wants to.
I can best describe Talbot as a decent human being, but I would not go so far to the point of saying he was a progressive, just like I made the point that for whatever modest ideas he had for changing the country, those ideas came very late. And it was like Gorbachev grabbing the straw and bringing perestroika in the Soviet Union. So to the extent, I mean, to the extent he appeared outward to be an independent thinker, but he was deeply entrenched in the oligarchy. The level of nepotism that was surrounding Talbot is unbelievable. You just need to check those that were in government Talbot time. So on a much more substantial level, nothing had changed during the Talbot regime. Nothing had changed. The interior of our country still remain deprived of basic services. And listening to that nonsense by John T. Richardson, look, we live our history. I was in the interior of Liberia when all I saw were tax collectors coming and beating my people in a hot sun to collect taxes. That was the Liberia that was good for John T. Richardson in Monrovia. I live in a Liberia where my uncle, who was the chief, was made to tote settlers and hammer from town to town. That's the Liberia I live in. And some Liberians, they have the audacity to keep mentioning these 13 people as if to say one human being is superior than another human being. Before the 13 people in Liberia got executed, how about the 88 chiefs that were executed from the Southtown, Grand Coulee, Maryland area? Who talk about them today? You talk about 13 people. Let's talk about the 250,000 Liberians that got killed in a war that was led by a settler. So we know our history. John T. Richardson, who said the murderous MPFL regime is not going to be the source of my history. He's definitely not going to be the source of my history. So he can put his history to his types and to his kind. But we know the history we're talking about. The history that challenged our culture, the history that challenged our civilization, the history that challenged our equality in our own country. It is the attempt to change all of these things, to change these conditions. These were the fights that the progressive led. And it was not only led by indigenous people. You can read it, Blighty, they were all in the forefront of this thing. Brunel, all of these people. So John T. Richardson, as far as I'm concerned, led one of the murderous attacks in our country. And if Liberia was really a country where we hold people accountable, people like John T. Richardson should be tried and punished for his crimes instead of writing history.
Mr. Freeman, before you come in, people look at the progressive 1980 and the result. It's like, okay, you talk about multipartyism and all that, but look at the country before 1980 and now. Is this something that we can be proud? Most people think that we are retrogressing. There's too much suffering. And that's why it is very hard for people to think that, oh, okay, let's celebrate the progressive, because what we have now is all no water, no electricity, I mean, low pay, crowded cities, and all the chaos. What do you say to that, Mr. Freeman?
If you build a house and the curtain walls that are supposed to uphold the roof is weak, it doesn't matter how strong the foundation is there, that roof is going to cave in and come tumbling down on that same foundation. The thing about it is that what was the vestiges that were being built during that time wasn't being built for the Liberian people. It was being built by the request of foreign agents that were ruling how the PRC made decisions and took actions for the Liberian people. So when you look at some of these people now reviewing and revisioning history, they built up all of the crumbling walls and let the termites in, because they were the termites that ate away at these walls. Now that the walls have crumbled, they say, oh, we had a foundation there, and you didn't build. No, we didn't build it. You guys built it. What we were trying to do was to make sure to inform our people that this crumble will come. And when the crumble came, you decided now you were going to be diversionary to show and point your hand towards the people who are fighting to build a stronger nation. And that's where the hypocrisy lies at. That's why I'm saying, do not listen to his story. You know some of the history. You were there. And for those of us who were there that went through these different types of happenings over the years, we can more aptly speak to what happened rather than just hypothesize and put things that are sycophants.
All right. Danielle, you got any question?
Well, I guess one thing that comes to mind while we have this conversation, and I keep hearing the word progressive, as someone who's born in the U.S. and lives in the U.S., I think about the talks of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, right? So you have two ends of the spectrum, even within the liberal or Democratic Party. With your experience in Liberia and what we know progressivism to have accomplished or not accomplished in Liberia, are you both as residents in America, are you supportive of the progressive movement in the US, or do you think it's just totally different from what you all were working toward in Liberia? Mr. Kunney, I'll start with you.
Oh no, I support some of the progressive ideas here. When you talk about healthcare, even though when you talk about healthcare, when you talk about affordable education, when you talk about affordable housing, not free, but affordable housing, yes, I support these ideas are consistent with even the progressive ideas at home. I mean, if you break the whole economic freedom, if you break down the whole fairness question, all of these things, the progressive ideas in the United States kind of correlate, are similar to some of these issues. In Liberia, our people want basic services. Our people want affordable housing. They want affordable medical coverage. They want a road network. They want electricity, affordable power, all of these things. So I don't see a big difference in the advocacy for those issues as they are advocated for here. My only thing is that I am a gradualist. I like to follow the gradual path. I want to believe social change is best sustained when it is gradual, when people are prepared for it, when people are educated, when people are conscientized of their own condition, and they take these changes in gradual steps. So that would be the little difference that I have with if you think about American politics, where people think that we should have this Medicare for all, we should have free this, free that. I think we have to take some gradual step to achieve these things. And I believe that one democratic administration after the other will continue to make progress on these things. That's how you have sustainable change.
Mr. Freeman, before you come in, let me read a few comments. I see our man William is back on the line, but here is what William wrote. When Mr. Kunney, when you mentioned about the 250,000 and also the 88 chiefs, he said, how about the transcontinental slave trade? Do you talk about them? Wow, really, you are misinformed and you are repeating the same thing Richardson is saying, but coming from him is a lie. Or Albert S. Cole said, does J.T. Richardson's history include the Autopause onslaught that he led on Monrovia in 1992? Julius Sankama said, please read the Journal of African History for a refreshing experience. Blamoto said, we know the things that the progressive told our people. Some of us grew up outside of Monrovia and the progressive misled us. Why couldn't the progressive put forward one candidate in the interest of the Liberian people? Let's start with you, Mr. Kunney. William said, what's about the transcontinental slave trade? Meaning Africans send African American. Okay, go ahead. You understand that?
But I mean, the question asked by William clearly for he himself got no basic understanding of the trans-American slave trade. He doesn't. The trans-American slave trade, transatlantic slave trade was the creation of Western imperialist interests. They had the ships, they had the plantations. They were out there, going there, taking Africans to bring them to slavery. So he doesn't understand.
It was Africans selling Africans to the slave traders.
Yeah, that's why I say he doesn't understand it. Look, what Williams is talking about is similar to someone who will accuse the few Jews that were in the concentration camp fighting for their own lives for self-preservation, is accusing those Jews for the Holocaust. That's what he's talking about. He doesn't understand. The whole Holocaust thing was the doing of Hitler, but you will find instances where few Jews were collaborating in the camps. Do you hold those Jews responsible for the Holocaust? He just buying some kind of talking point that is intended to whitewash slavery in this country. That's why I say he doesn't understand the transatlantic slave trade.
Mr. Freeman, Blamo said the progressive misled them. I too was in the interior when the progressive were making all the noise.
Well, those are all subject. I don't know what you call misled. I mean, how do somebody mislead you on the issue of justice? How do they mislead you on the issue of equality? How do they mislead you? Like I said, I gave one example. I didn't know that as a Liberian, I needed property to vote until the progressive came my door knocking and said, look, you think you are a citizen, you cannot vote until you get property. So what is misleading about that? You see, I continue to say, those who harbor those feelings are the failure of this generation, Dennis. They've failed to create a national consensus for themselves. So they see the failures and they attributing it to people 40 years, 30 years ago that they refused to give power. Their advocacy, let me end this point because you cut me off when I was making it. Their advocacy is instant ballot driven. They don't want to plant the tree for generation coming after them to benefit. This is why you see all the noise they're making. Like what Brother Freeman said, how many of the advocates today are in a village and in the interior of the country educating our people on improving voting decisions? How many of them doing that? All these advocates and political parties and institutions, they've all turned to charity institutions. that treat our people like foster children, visit them once every electoral cycle because they want to benefit from that fruit immediately. They don't want to plan anything long-term that generation coming after them will benefit from. So this is the cycle they're in. Tell me, young man, tell me which of these advocates you see leading a national movement that people like Toba Natipote led, that people like Bacchus Matthews led, that people like Henry Boima Formula, which are then leading that movement? They got these talk radio hosts, all they're promoting is replacement politics. We want the system as it is. We don't want no change. The only thing that is bad in the system, in their opinion, is those who running the system today. So if we get rid of the people that are running the system today, we will inherit it and continue it. That was not the politics of the progressive. The system was wrong. This is what's wrong with the system. We need multi-party democracy in this country. Multi-party democracy has arrived. It is the core of this generation to make it better. And stop whining. When those guys put their lives on the line, we were much younger than them. You're talking about a 26-year-old Traveler Mason, a 20-some-year-old Mama Famule, a less than 30-year-old and Famule. Sawyer was about what? 30 years old when he led the mayoral movement. What movement are they leading? What movement? What impact are they making? They failed the test of their generation. That is the fact. All they want is positions. They failed the test of their generation. They can't achieve anything.
Thank you, Mr. Kunney. Let Mr. Freeman come in. I think I see you getting very excited. Mr.
Yeah. He's getting too excited, and he's telling me now, my generation have failed. We still have our life. We haven't failed yet. Mr. Freeman, please.
And so your age.
Well, you know, to the other extent of some of what Kunney was saying, some of us, when we started in these movements, we were just entering our teens, and we came along because we understood what the country needed. We were being criticized at times by our own parents, by our own siblings at times. Many of them, I had people tell me that I wasn't going to live to be 20. As was told to many of the progressives. Did we do everything right? Well, if we did, we would be Jesus Christ. Did we stumble and fall at times? Yes. But what did we do? We got up and we kept on going. We kept on, sometimes we were plodding our ways through some of the difficulties of times. So it's easy to point your fingers and do revisionist history. But we worked with the implements of our time. We worked with the tools that we had available. We were in the back of vans running mimeographing machines. Many people don't know mimeographing machines today, but they were the printers of those days, running out papers that we have written or React and some of the other papers that came out to spread. And when we got caught, we knew that if we got caught, it was prison or even death. We knew the risks. We knew the risks on August 24th of 19, I think it was when the soldiers marched on LU's campus. We knew the risks when they marched on Cotton and raped. We knew the risks when people got out on April 14th of 1979. We knew the risk of people coming out to the streets of April 12, 1985. We knew the risk of speaking against all of the oppressions that were there. We knew the risks of all of these people. We knew that when we went out there, some of us that were going out there were not coming back. When we did. My younger brother got up and went to LU to demonstrate that day. We didn't find him for days. When we found him, he had a hole in his back. We knew those risks, and yet we took them. Today, we ask this generation to continue the risk. They will have pitfalls, but they'll have victories. We're looking for peaks and valleys. They will be there. We need to make sure that we admonish ourselves, not just blame other people, but to make sure that we too come up and step up to that generation that made those sacrifices.
Hmm.
And we're still willing to make those sacrifices as we've done over the many years that are here. Many of you need to recognize that we fought to get that TPP. We spent money over many years. We fought and got Ethel Morgan to Liberia. Yes, we fought, and many of us are still fighting, sending millions and millions of dollars home to support our people. Without us, Liberia would not be existent today. We do not claim that we are the angels of the time, but we claim that the little bit that we've done to add to the stature and the history of Liberia, let us make sure that this generation also put forth its own stature and sacrifices.
Thank you.
And
Again, ladies and gentlemen,
quickly.
you just spoke, my man.
Never know, quickly.
All right, be brave.
The question, look, I can, even with my eyes closed, I can point to the sacrifices of that time. I can point to the risks that people took at that time. We need to ask ourselves, what are the risks that today's generation taking? What are the risks? You got freedom of expression. It's all over the country. Over the radio stations, you can't even count. During our days, you couldn't even find a radio station to carry your story. What are the risks they're taking? You got all the megaphone, you got Facebook, you got WhatsApp. You're not taking any risks. But the fact of the matter is, you fail to bring a national agenda that mobilizes people. That's your failure. Admit that.
Mr. Kunney, let me read this quickly from someone who identifies as progressive as well, Mr. Dempster Yala. It's very long, but I beg your indulgence. He said to the moderators, I too count myself amongst the genre of progressive of Moja tendencies. My question, or perhaps reaction to people who find it pleasurable to condemn progressive for having failed the Liberian people is, that has been the alternative. What has been the alternative to those failed, quote unquote, failed progressive? All we see is internet advocacies from as far away as the internet can work. Like the brothers are saying, we challenge authorities head on or face to face, sometimes with bullets at our heads. In short, the progressive deserve credit for the democratic space Liberians enjoy today. Thank you. That's from Mr. Dempster Yala, who at one time was on this program and was imprisoned at the notorious Bella Yala. Back to you, Mr. C.A.
Thank you, Mr. Chad. Ladies and gentlemen watching us here, focus on Liberia. This is our Sunday prime time. My name is Anthony C.A., hosting with Dennis Jai and Daniel. Look, I have this question. This might be my last question, and on the issue of regrets. Regret, and it's more so about the death of Tubot. The death of Tubot because from my reading of the history, Tubot presidency was more like the peak of the progressive advocacy, and then though it started going downward. Many of you would say, no, we have no hand in the death of Tubot. Mr. Freeman, earlier, I think Daniel asked you, or somebody asked you, said you have no regret. Do you now regret that Tubot died as a human being, as a president? You have no regret at all? And then my last question is to all the progressive leaders, who is your progressive hero? Now discounting the contribution of the rest, but who among them is your progressive hero and why?
First of all, I didn't say that I had no regrets. I think you probably misheard. We had situations in Liberia wherein you always have to live with hope. When the coup took place, we did our best. There were many things that we did, trying to make sure that this situation did not go awry. The Liberian National Students Union was praised by international press for being brave enough to stand in front of Doe and ask him about when we were going to return to civilian rule. That we were brave enough to question him. And when I was at the MCSS Teachers Association, if you go back and look at the history in there, you will see there were so many times that we challenged Doe. There were several speeches I made, some of which happening in here in exile at that early time. And many other Liberians that took those steps, not only me, but there are many other Liberians who got up and we challenged the issues of the time. And like Desta was saying, we were doing these things here knowing that times the soldier will come and knock on your door, that there were bullets being fired at you, that your house was being burned. Yes, these things happened. That fellow Liberians, some of which are speaking today and having revisionist history, were the ones who were spies. They were spies under Talbot, they were spies under Tubman, they were spies under Dole. And they were out there undermining the efforts of the progressives. So when we look at history, we can always review it and have 20/20 hindsight. But in the throes of the things that were happening then, the best that we had were what we put forth. Did they fall short in certain areas? Yes, they did. Because we had our own limitations.
Mr. Freeman, which were the areas where we fall short?
Yep.
Where were some of those areas the progressives?
The progressives, we fell short because of certain types of modalities that we had, the technology of the time, the communicative systems that were available at the time. And did we have arguments amongst ourselves? Yes, like any human being. Even in your own household, you have arguments, brothers and sisters. We had arguments at times, we had disagreements about certain situations. But when we got out there, we put up a united front because we knew that the preservation of our country was very, very important. Like we say, unfortunately, we were hijacked by the coup. We were hijacked by certain circumstances that we had no control over. Many of us that were in the movements were not people that had money, that had the radio stations, that had newspapers, etc. The rudimentary things that we had were what we were using to put forth our agenda to the Liberian people. And many of them saw it, they agreed with it. But again, they refused to act because they were afraid. Because history had led them down the street that said, if you go down this road, you will be imprisoned, brutalized, and killed eventually. Many of these people sought for self-preservation.
Dennis.
Yeah. That's where.
Dennis, I will be leaving.
All right, Mr. Yancey,
I want to give the quote.
Yeah, please give your quote and then your final. So, because what I want people to conclude with here is, do we have progressivism today? Who are the progressives on the field today? Or did it stop with the Tipoters? And
all right, because they can answer that. Let me give the quote. When I use the word deport, the Liberians, the former slaves were deported. Let me give you the quote. You found it in Leonard Bennett's book. This is what he said. He said repeatedly during the course of his career, Lincoln urged that American blacks be sent to Africa or elsewhere. In 1854, he decided his first impulse would be to free all the slaves and send them to Liberia, to their own native land. In 1860, he called for the emancipation and deportation of slaves. In his State of the Union address as president, he twice called for deportation of blacks. In 1865, in the last days of his life, Lincoln said of blacks, I believe it would be better to export all of them some to fertile soil, fertile country with good climate, which they could have to themselves.
Mr. Nelson,
so that revisional history talking about people fair good for all this and that, his intention was to deport, and they deported those people.
Yeah, that what you are reading is 1960. That happened long before. By that time, the people were were in Liberia already. That was 1822. So if the Lincoln is talking about deportation in 1960, Liberians were all out of here. But the broader thing is...
nobody talk about 1960. Look, Lincoln was a part of the system.
Hold on, Mr. Yancia.
You were part of the system. It was there.
Mr. Yancia, hold on.
It was a belief.
Right, but this was 1860. The Liberians were repatriated 1822. But the broader picture I'm trying to for us to look at is whether they were repatriated, deported, or whatever is really a non-issue at this point. Africans return to Africa, and really we're supposed to be one now because they are there as Africans. That's their home, right?
No, but don't romanticize this stuff. Don't romanticize this stuff. The people were racist. They want to get rid of it. But I want to say thank you, everybody. I got to go to another meeting.
Yeah,
thank you. It was very fruitful. Freeman, I would like to have your number. I already have Kunney number. Thank you very much. It was very, very educational. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, yes, sir.
All right.
Goodbye.
Let's conclude with this. And Ansoni asked some questions. Mr. Kunney, can you respond?
Sonny, can you repeat the question again because the interruption was a little bit long?
Now discounting all of the progressive leaders, which one among them is your progressive hero and why? Mr. Freeman answered earlier whether there was any regret with the death of Talbot, whether any of you had any regret, and he said, yeah, he answered it, so your turn.
Well, let's say, like I indicated here earlier, the progressive movement had they had the funniest quality of Liberians. Funnier in terms of character, in terms of honesty, in terms of principle, in terms of patriotism. To be honest with you, and each of them, the ones that we got to know personally, they all have their strengths. And even the ones that we get to know historically, they all got their strength. It is very difficult to pick this one as the most outstanding. I mean, what will you say about, people like Blighty? What will you say about people like Joad Nimrod? What will you say about people like, where do you place people like D12? Where do you place people like Brunel, Neticia Brunel, Coleman, all of these people? Where do you put people like Tobana Tipote? Where do you put Burma Family? I mean, there are so many. So for me, the personality, like I told you earlier, I was not motivated by the personality. I've always been motivated by the kind of ideals, their consistency, their patriotism, their nationalism that they brought to the table. I mean, these guys, they taught us how to be analytical and how to understand social issues. So they are all brilliant leaders. Each of them have their strengths and their weaknesses. And I never really thought who would be you can pick any one of them. You can pick any one of them. They can be a good leader. I mean, let me go to the contemporary time, people that are interacting with. Look at Omen Tipote. Somebody that can, even every Liberian agree is one of the most uncorruptible individuals in our country. Someone that has shown that you can live a decent life without having a government job. Look at Tipote, look at Amos Sawyer. This man is not only a statesman, but he is a scholarly statesman. Liberia, he's a Liberian of great character. Look at Burma Family, an intellectual powerhouse, a nationalist, a patriot. And then you go down the line. Even look at my friend Dempster. Look at the sacrifices that they made. Look at Ezekiel Pajibo. They're all over the place, my brother.
From where?
Look at, even those that deceased. Who you gonna call? Wotapia, Tony Richardson. They're all over the place. So for our movement, it was not the individual. It was the idea. The idea. That's what we went for. But in terms of all of them, they are all fine Liberians. They inspire a lot of other people. And I think any of them, could be a leader that I admire.
Thank you. And Mr. Jago.
Yeah, do we have progressive today? That's the question I want to ask. Looking at the landscape, we didn't really even do the reflection, but looking at today's Liberia, is progressivism dead or is it alive? If yes, who are the actors? Who are the players?
Let me figure out that maybe the senior brother.
And who are the oppressors, if I may add?
Let me just kick the can a little bit. Maybe my senior brother will come and reinforce me. Look, the issues that the progressive fought for, they still exist in Liberia. They still exist in Liberia. I mean, there are people in Liberia that are still suffering. There are people in Liberia that don't have affordable education. You know, the political aspect of the struggle has been resolved. Now we have participatory democracy. But then the struggle goes to the other level. This is why the progressives always say the struggle continues. The struggle is never complete. Because the goal is for a better society. So long as we can all make the determination that our society needs to go to a better level, progressive ideals are still important. And are there people that are fighting for those ideals today? Yes. Are they being heard the way they used to be heard in the past? I think not. Because now the political dynamics of our country has shifted. So voters, the Liberian people are making different calculations. But it is not impossible for the progressive to resurrect. It's not impossible. So yes, if you tell me the things that we're fighting for is still there, yeah, those things still exist. Most of them are ongoing societal problems.
Resurrect. I don't believe that one, Mr. Kunney. I don't know how they resurrect, but I mean, I admire the progressive a whole lot. I'm a big fan of the progressive. Mr. Freeman, come in.
Don't be a fan, be a participant. And it's very, very important that you, as a young man with the vigor and vitality that we had a few years ago physically, and we still have today mentally, we might not be as physically affluent as we were. For someone like you, you know, it's never too late. You have to join the struggle. When we join the struggle, some of us joined it by commission, some joined it by omission. But you have to look at your country today and say, you know what, this is what I want, 10 years from now. This is what I want 30 years from now. Do you wish to see the same small Liberia that is underdeveloped, without water, without lights, without some of the basic necessities of life? Oh yeah, we got cell phone. You can't eat the cell phone. You want to see us as an economic power in Africa? Do you want to see us as a bastion for African independence and development? Do you want to see our independence of all of the attributes that are holding us down today? These are questions not just for our generation. Some of us are still fighting. Some of us are still fighting. We might not be as vociferous as we were in the past times. It does not mean that we're doing things here and there to help the country. A few years ago, out of Michigan here, we sent more than $1 million worth of medical equipment. Not many Liberians know about that. We're still doing works. We might not be fighting in the way that we were before. We're putting out some of the pamphlets and whatnot that are there. But Liberia still needs, when we talk about progressivism, it's not just, talk. It has to be within action. And these actions are still being purported by our people today. Kunney knows we are trying to make sure we revive the progressives in this country. And we're doing as much as we can. We're not going to be too loud about it right now until we get a better organization within ourselves. As a chemist, look, when you look at any kind of a cell, any kind of an atom, 99.9% of that atom's weight is in the center of it, the nucleus. But yet that nucleus makes up a very, very small portion. So what we need to do is we're trying to form this nucleus group that we can use to balance the whole equation within the Liberian diaspora.
Thank you.
All of the confluence of ideas that we've had now from being in the United States or Australia, other parts of Africa and Europe. Now, how do we bring these confluences of ideas together so that we can look and say, you know what, this is where the hybridized Liberia is at today. We got a lot of work to do, and we need everybody.
Thank you. Well, we want to thank all of you. I think this has been a very spirited discussion. We still have questions and comments on Facebook, but we are way out of time. So let me throw it back to my co-host, Daniel and Asuni. Let's conclude this.
Daniel, you go for
Yeah,
you go
I'll
for
go for it, Sony. It's definitely been an insightful conversation. Just being, I guess, completely honest and true to myself, I do have to say that I'm a little disturbed by how some of the conversation has gone. You know, I understand why the progressive movement came into existence. I understand that a minority group oppressed a majority group within the country and things were not okay for everybody. But I guess what I have a hard time understanding is we will look at the settlers or the Americo-Liberians and say they brought back the mentality of slave masters and oppressed people. And then at the same time, you know, I'm hearing callers from the progressive movement doing the reverse now, where, you know, it's almost hateful messaging toward the settler or Americo-Liberian group. So for me, you know, I don't know, whatever generation I am, I guess I'm wondering, where does the hatred stop? Or when do we say, okay, I did you wrong, you did me wrong, and let's see how we can move forward. But I don't understand how any movement within Liberia will help progress the country if we are all not united. So yeah, just a little confused still with that. And then also being of a business background, when you sit in business meetings or in rooms and you discuss what you've done or what your plan was and what you accomplished, at the end of the day, it will be, this is what we did well and this is what we did not do well. And so I guess in this conversation, I have not heard that as well, that yes, we accomplished this, or yes, this is what we did, but this is what we could have done better on. So I feel it difficult to have a honest conversation about this. All of our conversations as Liberians, it seems to tend to be one-sided. We were all right, or this other group was all wrong. When do we meet in the middle? So that's just my conclusion for this conversation.
And we'll let our panelists to conclude with that thought as well. Asuni.
All right, we will give our panelists in their concluding statement to conclude with that thought expressed by Daniel. I think it's a very, very valid point. No human being is so evil that you can't find any good in them. And so maybe our panelists need to touch on that. My final statement here is to make an announcement to our followers here that starting Saturday, Mr. Wilmot Kunney, an analyst here at Focus on Liberia, will be joining me. We'll try to do it on a weekly basis every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to talk about decentralization. Mr. Kunney is the executive director of LIPA, that's the Liberian Diaspora Political Action Committee. The ideas that he believes in, that, look, to change the country, you must use ideas, and the ideas must be coordinated and be communicated well. He wants to join me to start that program here at Focus on Liberia. So we just want to announce to you and hope that you will join us, and so we can all learn from Mr. Kunney. So to you, let's start with our senior man here, Mr. Freeman. Daniel is saying, you can't just say this side is all bad and there's not good in the other side. Or instead, everybody is just saying that this is what they did right, this is what they did right, and they are the better side, and the other side, they are the evil. Where do we meet in the middle? How do we meet in the middle? That's why she's confused about it. She doesn't see that.
The exact sentiments that Danielle expressed, and I thank her as a young person for having that expansive mind, is what we have been talking about. Unfortunately, if we fail to communicate it to her as best as possible, then hopefully we can come back and expand on what what goes on from now. We need everybody, Daniel, as I was saying earlier to Mr. Sheehan. We need everyone because some of the new, when I talk about the confluence of ideas, it has to come from, it has to be circumstantial. It has to be all around. We have to come and look at what we've done in the past, what has been done today. How can we mesh them together and come out with, earlier I said, the hybridization of our ideologies and etc. We need, maybe I use a scientific term, but yeah, what do we put together as a people? I have American Liberians in my family. I have native Liberians in my family. I was born in Montserrat. I was raised in Limba. I went to school in Lopar County. My parents are from Maryland and Kidmouth County. My wife is from Swino. I have friends. I've been in every county in Liberia, enjoyed all of that. I have friends across the political spectrum. Sometimes we get together and we argue about different things. This year, their way, I see it my way, but that is always going to exist. I stated earlier that we were not all the times right. We had, arguments in amongst ourselves about, the ideologies and the modalities and the functioning of things. But now what we need is the infusion of ideas from someone like Danielle, from Jahir, from Sia, that we can come together. You can criticize us anytime. Criticism doesn't always mean you say something bad about the person. You can critique a person and say something positive about them. But we need this dialogue.
Right.
And I thank you guys for having this forum that allows us to have the dialogue, because it has become almost impossible when you listen to some of the loud noises out there to figure out what has been said that is right.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Kunney, conclude with where do we go from here?
Well, I just want to also respond
and please adjust your camera so we can see you. Thank you.
Okay. I just also want to, as part of my concluding statement, add to what Danielle said. I think the question, some of the things that have been done when it comes to the progressive movement is sometimes to misrepresent the purpose of the movement. My understanding of what the movement stands for was not a battle between settlers and indigenous. And I essentially view the entire thing as a class struggle. It was a class struggle for me. So this is why you find in my presentation here today, there are certain individuals that we cited here that in our opinion are progressive, that are also part of some settler ancestry. But you will find detractors of the progressive movement that will want to cast the struggle within, that kind of prism. So, but sometimes when we say we don't have regret for what the progressive movement did, is meant to say that the issues that they advocated against, there can be no regret for those issues. There can be no regret for calling for equal participation of everyone in the political process. How do you regret that for being part of that? There can be no regret for calling for equitable distribution of economic resources in the country. So for me, I don't regret those kind of issues. Those were, as I said, those were the issues that attracted me to the progressive movement. And so going forward, look, as I indicated here, the progressive, they met the challenges of their generation. That call was for multi-party democracy, they achieved it. The Martinican Algerian social psychiatric revolutionary Frantz Fanon said, every generation must meet up to this challenge. I'm paraphrasing it. They must either live up to it or betray it. The challenge for this generation is, how do we improve on the multi-party democracy that we now have? That is the challenge of this generation. And this is where the colossal failure is coming from. Because this generation is demonstrating a kind of failing in looking at our democratic process and improving on it, making it better. There are issues that we can still organize around. It may not be now multi-party democracy, but let's look at our governance structure. Let's look at the governance structure of the country. Are we comfortable with it? Where you have centralization of power in Monrovia and the rest of our counties are deprived of equal participation in the governing process. These are all issues that can help to improve the country. So for me, where we go from here, the question that you asked, is for this generation to stop whining.
And you're from that generation, Mr. Stop excluding yourself.
My man, I'm almost leaving this generation. I'm on the verge of leaving. It's for this generation of Dennis Jah, Sonny, and my sister Danielle. I'm calling your name because I just talking about the age ranges. Now you as a person. It's for this generation to stop whining and crying on things that happened 30, 40 years ago. Look, all the people you want here about, like my brother said here, even though they may still be, they are still intellectually powerful and things, but physically they're not there. You want to take how many people there from retirement to go teach somebody how to vote or what their vote means? So the question is, how we go forward from here is for this generation to step up. It is this generation that making our democracy a singing democracy. They're making our democracy a dancing democracy. They're making our democracy a rest-sharing democracy. They're making our democracy where you don't have to do anything but come treating the Liberian people as foster children. When visit come, you carry bag or rice. It is the doing of this generation. So this generation must rise up and live up to the true meaning of democracy.
Thank you, sir.
Making our democracy better. Then where we go from here.
Thank you. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our broadcast here at Focus on Liberia. If you have been following us, all you got here is nothing but quality. That's what we do. We educate, we elevate, we promote all things Liberia. It was an honor to be here with Dennis Jah, the host, Daniel, co-host, and me also co-hosting and sharing this platform with our two outstanding panelists, Mr. Wilmot Kunney and Mr. Manju Freeman. Eda, thank you. We will reach out to you to do this again. The knowledge that you have, though is yours, but we want to claim it as being for us too, because you are a Liberian. And when you give it to us, maybe we can use it better to better our country. We all will reach out to you. For Kunney, he's stuck with us. He's not going anywhere. Mr. Jah.
Until then, my name is Dennis Jah on behalf of the crew saying good night and God bless you.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home. Liberia.